In Revenge of the Sith, Anakin Skywalker travels to Mustafar in order to kill the Separatist leaders and officially end the Clone Wars. However, I have always wondered that this is such a small and simple task for Anakin to do entirely himself. None of the Separatist leaders are warriors, and based on Revenge of the Sith, they only had a small team of droids protecting them. So why was Anakin sent to defeat them when he could have stayed on Coruscant and helped Sidious more proactively? So let's say in this story, after the raid on the Jedi Temple was complete, a squadron of 501st clones were sent to Mustafar to kill the leaders and shut down droid productions. Anakin would go to Padme's apartment where she was terrified with what happened. He tried to explain that the Jedi tried to overthrow the Republic, but deep down, she knew this wasn't true. She had lived around the Jedi and been a senator for the Republic for almost a decade. The Jedi weren't killers or traitors, but she also didn't understand the extent of Anakin's fall to the dark side. All she knew was that something was terribly wrong. Anakin would tell her to remain at the apartment. He had some very important things to do with the Chancellor. A few hours later, Obi-Wan and Yoda would arrive on Coruscant where they learn about Anakin and Palpatine's betrayal. Kenobi couldn't believe it, and he was distraught. He remembered back to his time training Anakin. Where did he make his mistakes? Where were the signs? Guilt hit the Jedi Master like a ton of bricks. He collapses to the floor in agony. Yoda remained stoic and knew that the time for emotions was not now. Instead, they had to use the little time remaining to defeat the Sith once and for all. In Revenge of the Sith, Yoda tells Obi-Wan to fight Anakin while he fights Sidious. I believe this is because Yoda could sense that Anakin was off-world, and if he could sense that his presence was still nearby, the Grand Master wouldn't have split up with Obi-Wan. So now they stay together. Knowing about Padme and Anakin's connection, Obi-Wan secretly contacts Padme to meet with her. The confrontation would be similar to Revenge of the Sith. Kenobi explains that Anakin has turned to the dark side and that he killed younglings. The man he was is gone, replaced by Darth Vader. Padme wouldn't believe him. She saw him just hours ago. He was perfectly fine. Obi-Wan couldn't make sense of it either, but he also couldn't deny the security hologram he saw of Anakin slaughtering children. They had to do something before it was too late. Meanwhile, Anakin would meet with Palpatine. Since Anakin remained on Coruscant instead of going to Mustafar, Palpatine decided to use this to his advantage. He assigns Anakin a new mission of cleansing the Senate. He must introduce himself as the Emperor's enforcer, the Iron Fist of the Empire. The light that once shone Anakin Skywalker was dwindling, and he was almost fully consumed by Darth Vader. Sidious knew that giving the boy a mission of death would corrupt his soul even further. During the night, Anakin would go and collect all the senators who were Jedi and Republic loyalists, those who had already spoken out against the Empire. At this point, with the Empire only officially being created hours ago, nobody really knew what to think. Most of the senators would blindly follow anything Palpatine did, but there were lots of people who weren't happy and believed the Republic should have remained. These people were Anakin's targets. Anakin collects Bail Organa, Mon Mothma, Orn-Free Tar, and Jar Jar Binks. There was a small part of Palpatine that wondered if Skywalker would take Padme, but deep down, he knew that would never happen. In front of the Senate, Anakin would introduce himself as Vader as he presented the terrified senators. Anakin stood in the center pod as he spoke of their treachery and how anyone found to betray the Empire would meet the same fate. This wasn't just a public scare, it was an execution. One by one, Anakin took their heads with the sapphire blade of his lightsaber. The entire arena was deathly silent. The cold chill of Coruscant's wind whistled throughout the chamber. It was done. Anakin Skywalker was no more. Only Vader remained. Across the city, Padme and Obi-Wan watched as he murdered the senators in cold blood. Tears flooded Amidala's face. Her husband was a murderer. She mourned the loss of her friends, knowing their pure hearts were too good for this world. Her mind was conflicted. If this was anyone else other than Anakin, she would swear to have them put behind bars or even killed. But even now, after everything, a part of her found an excuse for Anakin in her heart. But Kenobi shook the hesitation out of her. He expressed that this is why they urgently needed to act, to stop him. She agreed and told Kenobi that she believes that she can turn him back to the light if she could just talk to him. It was worth a shot.
Hey guys, really quick, I'd like to talk to you about our Black Friday sale over at Fantasy Sabers. The deal we are running is that with every order, we are giving away one free mystery saber. Now this mystery saber can be any saber from our website. The sale is running from the 25th of November until the 2nd of December, so don't miss out. This is a one-time only sale for you to get your free mystery saber. Check out Fantasy Sabers at the first link in the description. Now back to the video.
Padme meets with Anakin in their apartment where she tries to reason with him. This conversation was similar to Mustafar in Revenge of the Sith. She tells him that she knows he has turned to the dark side and killed younglings. Anakin would feel targeted and his guard is immediately raised. Padme explains that Obi-Wan wants to help him, that he knows about the baby and it's okay. Anakin doesn't like hearing about Obi-Wan, believing him to be a traitor to the Republic and going against his own agenda. He tells Padme to stop mentioning Obi-Wan, that he is the only one that limited his power and he wants to see him destroyed. Obi-Wan and Yoda, who were hiding in the other room listening, became very cautious. This wasn't working. Padme wasn't breaking through to him. It was almost like Anakin knew he was being judged. He could tell that Padme did not like the man that he had become. As Yoda and Obi-Wan sense that he isn't going to listen, they reveal themselves. This only enrages Anakin, and he pulls his hilt off his belt, pointing the weapon at the Jedi. He tells them to stand back. As Kenobi approaches, he tries one last time to reach his old friend. Perhaps the combined memory of him and Padme will be enough to spark the light, but Anakin's anger boiled and he fell further to the dark side. Seeing Yoda only reminded him of the dogmatic Jedi, of their cruel ways. It was because of them that his mother was dead, that she remained a slave. Anakin had fallen into his own arrogance and there was no saving him. Padme had lost her composure as tears flooded her face, creating an evening of rainfall in the apartment. Skywalker knew that he didn't have the strength to take Yoda and Kenobi together, and so he retreats, cursing at Padme as he leaps out the window to the streets below. His hate was brewing as he stormed Palpatine's office. The Emperor could sense his pain. It was contagious. The old Naboo senator loved it. He had been waiting for this day for a long time. But when Anakin told him about his encounter with Kenobi and Yoda, he sheathed his smirk. The Green Grandmaster lived, his most powerful adversary. Anakin says they must kill Obi-Wan and Yoda so they can stop corrupting Padme. They are turning her against him. Palpatine knew he could use Anakin's love for Padme to his advantage once more. Sidious saw Anakin's fury as a tool to push him even further, and he confirms that by saying, only by destroying the Jedi can he ever truly regain his wife's love. Back at Padme's apartment, Yoda was furious. His stoicism was leaving him. He told Kenobi that they tried it his way, but diplomacy isn't the resolution of the Sith. To defeat the Sith, you have to beat them at their own game, and that is violence. He tells Kenobi that it's time they fight Sidious and Vader. Padme tried to stop them, but even Obi-Wan had given up hope in saving his old friend. Anakin's actions were irreversible. Yoda and Obi-Wan leave and go to the Senate building, following their senses to locate the Sith Lords. Just like in Revenge of the Sith, the Jedi march before the Sith Lords, locating them standing in the Senate pod of the Senate. Sidious snarled at the sight of Yoda, viewing him as his final obstacle to true power. Anakin's rage was boiling and his excitement grew. He knew that Sidious and him could take the Jedi. As they ignite their lightsabers, the fight begins. Yoda first attacks Palpatine as Kenobi focuses on Anakin. This was brother against brother, master against apprentice. In the first moments of the duel, it didn't feel real. For maybe 1,000 times in their life, they had fought each other. though always with training sabers and under the comforting setting of the Jedi Temple training rooms. But this was different. Anakin's hate had expelled all sense of light within him, and he was fighting to kill. He channeled his Form 5 fighting style to overwhelm Kenobi, but Obi-Wan was considered the master of Form 3. He could use his defensive form to fight forever. Their moves were so fast, having known each other's style so well. But the difference was Anakin's hate, his pull on the dark side. It is said that when Anakin turned evil, his power ability rose from a level 7 to a level 9, completely skipping a level, something unprecedented in history. But he was the chosen one after all. Kenobi kept fighting, but he was struggling to keep up. Sidious and Yoda's battle was different to the younger generation. They focused on their force powers and intellect of the force, rather than the brute strength from a lightsaber. As Yoda used his agility to jump from Senate pod to pod, Palpatine blasted lightning at him, doing everything in his power to render the Grand Master dead. As Yoda leaped into Palpatine's pod, he caught the Sith Lord's lightning as they entered a face-off. Sidious poured his anger and hate into the lightning, while Yoda used his light and internal goodness to fuel him. Ultimately, they were both pushed back. As they both realized their force powers were equal, they ignited their sabers and finally swung at each other using the blade of a force user. The duel between Obi-Wan and Anakin was close, and it seemed as though either of them could win. But as Anakin began using the Force to direct Senate pods at Kenobi, similar to Vader directing external debris at Luke in The Empire Strikes Back, Kenobi finally faltered. As one pod hit him from behind, Obi-Wan lost control of his lightsaber and fell to the floor. Vader had done it. He had beaten his greatest enemy. Standing above the Jedi Master, he raised his blade above his head and prepared to strike. But just as his blade was about to come down, Padme Amidala rushes into the Senate building and screams at Anakin to stop. She pleads for Anakin to listen. She speaks about their love, their unborn child, mentioning anything to just break through and stop him from killing his best friend. She says it isn't too late, that he can come back to the light. Anakin stands motionless, frozen in time as he hears her words. Padme asks Anakin what Shmi would be thinking right now. Even Qui-Gon, this isn't what they would have wanted. As Anakin wavers, not knowing what to do, Obi-Wan takes advantage of this opportunity. He recalls his lightsaber that had fallen to his grip and ignites it, completely severing Anakin's legs from his torso as he falls down in the most pain he has ever felt. Padme gasps and Sidious winces. Anakin was defeated and out of the fight. From here, Kenobi joins Yoda in his fight against Palpatine. Sidious now had to defend against two of the greatest duelists of the era. There was a small part of Sidious that always feared Kenobi's power after he killed Maul all those years ago. Even to this day, he didn't understand how he did it. Perhaps Obi-Wan would have made a good apprentice, Sidious thought to himself. As the Darth tried to find an opening on either Jedi, he eventually left himself defenseless, and Yoda delivered the final strike, killing Darth Sidious. The following days would be very difficult. Obi-Wan and Yoda worked hard with Bail Organa to restore the Republic. This involved showing the Senate that Palpatine was evil, not the Jedi, and it was him who orchestrated the Clone Wars and sentenced trillions to their deaths. During this process, Bail Organa was elected as the next Supreme Chancellor, and the support of the Jedi helped pave the way for the rest of the Senate to trust in them again. The Jedi Temple was restored, and all of the lone Jedi who had survived Order 66 across the galaxy returned home. Together, they all worked to slowly rebuild the Jedi Order. Eventually, as Yoda passed on to the Force, Obi-Wan would become the new Grand Master, and his leadership would herald in a new era of the Jedi Order. As for Anakin, he was sentenced to life in prison. He had committed the worst atrocity of all time, killing younglings. Kenobi couldn't come to terms with what his old friend had done, and he vowed to never visit him in prison. But the same could not be said for Padme. She knew her husband was still in there somewhere, buried deep within. A few days after the Battle of Coruscant, Padme would give birth to Luke and Leia, and she would survive. She would constantly visit Anakin, speaking to him almost every day and trying to remind him of who he is. At first, he was a pile of hate and he screamed and cursed at her to stop seeing him. He felt betrayed. He felt as though she had chosen the Jedi over him. However, the turning point was when she finally brought the children to see him. When he realized that she didn't die in childbirth, things began to change. He wondered why his visions didn't come true and how she survived without any help. But as his children began to see him and recognized him as his father, his nature changed. He became timid. He didn't lash out or scream, and even got excited when little Luke learned how to walk or even call him father. Every time Leia saw Anakin's face, a massive smile took over. They were young and didn't understand anything about the world. That's what Anakin liked. They were the first people to look at him like he wasn't a massive disappointment. Over the course of a couple of years, Anakin slowly turned back to the light, and he and Padme fell back in love. They understood his mistakes and how he had been in the wrong in turning to the dark side. He regretted everything. When Padme finally knew that her husband had returned, she would break him out of prison, and together, along with their children, they would leave Coruscant for good. At first, the entire Republic army and even Jedi under Yoda's leadership were sent looking for them, and for good reason. Anakin was the most powerful man in the galaxy, and letting him loose could cause carnage. But the duo simply hid away on the corner of Naboo where they lived a peaceful life. When Kenobi took over as Grand Master of the Order, he stopped the search for them, understanding that they had found peace together and that Anakin wasn't a danger to the world anymore. Anakin and Padme finally got their happy ever after, but it came at the expense of the entire Jedi Order.
Ignite your imagination with Fantasy Sabers.
If you enjoyed today's video, you must watch What If Ahsoka Saved Anakin on Mustafar and What If Anakin Killed Obi-Wan on Mustafar. Please check out our saber shop, Fantasy Sabers, for the largest collection of replicas, Padawan sabers, and more. The link is first in the description. Thank you all for watching, and may the Force be with you.